Good evening and welcome back to Evelina, penultimate episode. I have heard no suggestions so far for what I should read afterwards, starting on Wednesday. It's coming up very soon. So bearing that in mind, I'll probably go with what I choose. We shall see. Letter the 80th. Evelina in continuation. 11th October. Yesterday morning, as soon as breakfast was over, Lord Orville went to the Hotwells to wait upon my father with my double petition. Mrs. Beaumont then, in general terms, proposed a walk in the garden. Mrs. Selwyn said she had letters to write, but Lady Louisa rose to accompany her. I had some reason to imagine, from the notice with which her ladyship had honoured me during breakfast, that her brother had acquainted her with my present situation, and her behaviour now confirmed my conjecture, for when I would have gone upstairs, instead of suffering me as usual to pass disregarded, she called after me with an affected surprise. "Miss Anville, did you walk with us?" There seemed something so little-minded in this sudden change of conduct, that from an involuntary motion of contempt I thanked her, with a coldness like her own, and declined her offer. Yet observing that she blushed extremely at my refusal, and recollecting she was sister to Lord Orville, my indignation subsided, and upon Mrs. Beaumont's repeating the invitation, I accepted it. Our walk proved extremely dull. Mrs. Beaumont, who never says much, was more silent than usual. Lady Louisa strove in vain to lay aside the restraint and distance she had hitherto preserved, and as to me, I was too conscious of the circumstances to which I owed their attention to feel either pride or pleasure from receiving it. Lord Orville was not long absent. He joined us in the garden with a look of gaiety and good humour that revived us all. "You are just the party," said he, "I wish to see together. Will you, madam," taking my hand, "allow me the honour of introducing you by your real name to two of my nearest relations? Mrs. Beaumont, give me leave to present to you the daughter of Sir John Belmont, a young lady who, I am sure, must long since have engaged your esteem and admiration, though you were a stranger to her birth." "My lord," said Mrs. Beaumont, graciously saluting me, "the young lady's rank in life, your lordship's recommendation, or her own merit, would any one of them have been sufficient to have entitled her to my regard, and I hope she has always met with that respect in my house, which is so much her due, though had I been sooner made acquainted with her family, I should doubtless have better known how to have secured it." "Miss Belmont," said Lord Orville, "can receive no lustre from family, whatever she may give to it. Louisa, you will, I am sure, be happy to make yourself an interest in the friendship of Miss Belmont, whom I hope shortly," kissing my hand and joining it with her ladyship's, "to have the happiness of presenting to you by yet another name, and by the most endearing of titles." I believe it would be difficult to say whose cheeks were at that moment of the deepest dye, Lady Louisa's or my own, for the conscious pride with which she has hitherto slighted me gave to her an embarrassment which equalled the confusion that an introduction so unexpected gave to me. She saluted me, however, and with a faint smile said, "I shall esteem myself very happy to profit by the honour of Miss Belmont's acquaintance." I only curtsied, and we walked on, but it was evident from the little surprise they expressed that they had already been informed of the state of the affair. We were soon after joined by more company, and Lord Orville then in a low voice took an opportunity to tell me the success of his visit. In the first place, Thursday was agreed to, and in the second, my father, he said, was much concerned to hear of my uneasiness, sent me his blessing, and complied with my request of seeing him, with the same readiness he should agree to any other I could make. Lord Orville, therefore, settled that I should wait upon him in the evening, and at his particular request, unaccompanied by Mrs. Selwyn. This kind message, and the prospect of so soon seeing him, gave me sensations of mixed pleasure and pain, which wholly occupied my mind till the time of my going to the Hotwell. Mrs. Beaumont lent me her chariot, and Lord Orville absolutely insisted upon attending me. "If you go alone," said he, "Mrs. Selwyn will certainly be offended, but if you allow me to conduct you, though she may give the freer scope to her raillery, she cannot possibly be affronted, and we had much better suffer her laughter than provoke her satire." Indeed, I must own I had no reason to regret being so accompanied, for his conversation supported my spirits from drooping, and made the ride seem so short that we actually stopped at my father's door before I knew we had proceeded 10 yards. He handed me from the carriage and conducted me to the parlour, at the door of which I was met by Mr. Macartney. "Ah, my dear brother," cried I, "how happy am I to see you here!" He bowed and thanked me. Lord Orville then, holding out his hand, said, "Mr. Macartney, I hope we shall be better acquainted. I promise myself much pleasure from cultivating your friendship." "Your lordship does me but too much honour," answered Mr. Macartney. "But where," cried I, "is my sister? For so I must already call, and always consider her. I am afraid she avoids me. You must endeavour, my dear brother, to prepossess her in my favour, and reconcile her to owning me." "Oh, madam," cried he, "you are all goodness and benevolence, but at present I hope you will excuse her, for I fear she has hardly fortitude sufficient to see you. In a short time, perhaps." "In a very short time, then," said Lord Orville. "I hope you will yourself introduce her, and that we shall have the pleasure of wishing you both joy. Allow me, my Evelina, to say we, and permit me in your name as well as my own to entreat that the first guests we shall have the happiness of receiving may be Mr. and Mrs. Macartney." A servant then came to beg I would walk upstairs. I besought Lord Orville to accompany me, but he feared the displeasure of Sir John, who had desired to see me alone. He led me, however, to the foot of the stairs, and made the kindest effort to give me courage, but indeed he did not succeed, for the interview appeared to me in all its terrors, and left me no feeling but apprehension. The moment I reached the landing-place, the drawing-room door was opened, and my father, with a voice of kindness, called out, "My child, is it you?" "Yes, sir," cried I, springing forward and kneeling at his feet. "It is your child, if you will own her." He knelt by my side, and folding me in his arms, "Own thee?" repeated he. "Yes, my poor girl, and heaven knows with what bitter contrition." Then raising both himself and me, he brought me into the drawing-room, shut the door, and took me to the window, where, looking at me with great earnestness, "Poor unhappy Caroline!" cried he, and to my inexpressible concern, he burst into tears. Need I tell you, my dear sir, how mine flowed at the sight? I would again have embraced his knees, but hurrying from me, he flung himself upon a sofa, and leaning his face into his arms, seemed for some time absorbed in bitterness of grief. I ventured not to interrupt a sorrow I so much respected, but waited in silence and at a distance till he recovered from its violence. But then it seemed in a moment to give way to a kind of frantic fury, for starting suddenly, with a sternness which at once surprised and frightened me, "Child," cried he, "hast thou yet sufficiently humbled thy father? If thou hast, be contented with this proof of my weakness, and no longer force thyself into my presence." Thunderstruck by a command so unexpected, I stood still and speechless, and doubted whether my own ears did not deceive me. "Oh, go, go!" cried he passionately. "In pity, in compassion, if thou valuest my senses, leave me, and for ever." I will," cried I, greatly terrified, and I moved hastily towards the door, yet stopping when I reached it, and almost involuntarily dropping on my knees. "Vouchsafe," cried I, "oh, sir, vouchsafe but once to bless your daughter, and her sight shall never more offend you." "Alas!" cried he in a softened voice, "I am not worthy to bless thee. I am not worthy to call thee daughter. I am not worthy that the fair light of heaven should visit my eyes. O God, that I could but call back the time ere thou wast born, or else bury its remembrance in eternal oblivion." "Would to heaven," cried I, "that the sight of me were less terrible to you, that instead of irritating I could soothe your sorrows. Oh, sir, how thankfully would I then prove my duty, even at the hazard of my life." "Are you so kind?" cried he gently. "Come hither, child. Rise, Evelina. Alas, it is for me to kneel, not you. And I would kneel, I would crawl upon the earth, I would kiss the dust, could I by such submission obtain the forgiveness of the representative of the most injured of women." "Oh, sir," exclaimed I, "that you could but read my heart, that you could but see the filial tenderness and concern with which it overflows, you would not then talk thus, you would not then banish me your presence and exclude me from your affection." "Good God!" cried he, "is it then possible that you do not hate me? Can the child of the wronged Caroline look at and not execrate me? Wast thou not born to abhor and bred to curse me? Did not thy mother bequeath thee her blessing on condition that thou shouldst detest and avoid me?" "Oh, no, no, no!" cried I. Think not so unkindly of her, nor so hardly of me. I then took from my pocket-book her last letter, and pressing it to my lips with a trembling hand, and still upon my knees, I gave it out to him, hastily snatching it from me. "Great heaven!" cried he. "'Tis her writing. Whence comes this? Who gave it to you? Why had I not it sooner?" I made no answer. His vehemence intimidated me, and I ventured not to move from the suppliant posture in which I had put myself. He went from me to the window, where his eyes were for some time riveted upon the direction of the letter, though his hand shook so violently he could hardly hold it. Then bringing it to me, "Open it," cried he, "for I cannot." I had myself hardly strength to obey him, but when I had, he took it back, and walked hastily up and down the room, as if dreading to read it. At length, turning to me, "Do you know," cried he, "its contents?" "No, sir," answered I, "it has never been unsealed." He then again went to the window and began reading. Having hastily run it over, he cast up his eyes with a look of desperation. The letter fell from his hand, and he exclaimed, "Yes, thou art sainted! Thou art blessed, and I am cursed for ever!" He continued some time fixed in this melancholy position, after which, casting himself with violence upon the ground, "O wretch!" cried he, "unworthy life and light! In what dungeon canst thou hide thy head?" I could restrain myself no longer. I rose and went to him. I did not dare speak, but with pity and concern unutterable, I wept and hung over him. Soon after, starting up, he again seized the letter, exclaiming, "Acknowledge thee, Caroline! Yes, with thy heart's best blood would I acknowledge thee. Oh, that thou couldst witness the agony of my soul! 10,000 daggers could not have wounded me like this letter." Then again, after reading it, "Evelina," he cried, "she charges me to receive thee. Wilt thou, in obedience to her will, own for thy father the destroyer of thy mother?" What a dreadful question! I shuddered, but could not speak. "To clear her fame and receive her child," continued he, looking steadfastly at the letter, "are the conditions upon which she leaves me her forgiveness. Her fame I have already cleared, and oh, how willingly would I take her child to my bosom, fold her to my heart, call upon her to mitigate my anguish, and pour the balm of comfort on my wounds, were I not conscious I deserve not to receive it, and that all my affliction is the result of my own guilt." It was in vain I attempted to speak. Horror and grief took from me all power of utterance. He then read aloud from the letter, "Look not like thy unfortunate mother. Sweet soul, with what bitterness of spirit hast thou written! Come hither, Evelina. Gracious heaven," looking earnestly at me, "never was likeness more striking. The eye, the face, the form. Oh, my child, my child!" Imagine, sir, for I can never describe my feelings when I saw him sink upon his knees before me. "Oh, dear resemblance of thy murdered mother! Oh, all that remains of the most injured of women! Behold thy father at thy feet, bending thus lowly to implore you would not hate him. Oh, then, thou representative of my departed wife, speak to me in her name, and say that the remorse which tears my soul tortures me not in vain." "Oh, rise, rise, my beloved father," cried I, attempting to assist him. "I cannot bear to see you thus. Reverse not the law of nature. Rise yourself, and bless your kneeling daughter." "May heaven bless thee, my child," cried he, "for I dare not." He then rose, and embracing me most affectionately, added, I see that thou art all kindness, softness, and tenderness. I need not have feared thee. Thou art all the fondest father could wish, and I will try to frame my mind to less painful sensations at thy sight. Perhaps the time may come when I may know the comfort of such a daughter. At present I am only fit to be alone. Dreadful as are my reflections, they ought merely to torment myself. Adieu, my child. Be not angry. I cannot stay with thee. Oh, Evelina, thy countenance is a dagger to my heart. Just so thy mother looked. Just so. Tears and sighs seemed to choke him, and waving his hand, he would have left me, but clinging to him, "Oh, sir," cried I, will you so soon abandon me? Am I again an orphan? Oh, my dear, my long-lost father, leave me not, I beseech you. Take pity on your child, and rob her not of the parent she so fondly hoped would cherish her. You know not what you ask, cried he. The emotions which now rend my soul are more than my reason can endure. Suffer me then to leave you, impute it not to unkindness, but think of me as well as thou canst. Lord Orville has behaved nobly. I believe he will make thee happy. Then again embracing me, God bless thee, my dear child, cried he. God bless thee, my Evelina. Endeavour to love, at least not to hate me, and to make me an interest in thy filial bosom, by thinking of me as thy father. I could not speak. I kissed his hands on my knees, and then with yet more emotion he again blessed me and hurried out of the room, leaving me almost drowned in tears. Oh, sir, all goodness as you are, how much will you feel for your Evelina during a scene of such agitation? I pray heaven to accept the tribute of his remorse and restore him to tranquillity. When I was sufficiently composed to return to the parlour, I found Lord Orville waiting for me with the utmost anxiety. And then a new scene of emotion, though of a far different nature, awaited me, for I learnt by Mr. Macartney that this noblest of men had insisted the so long supposed Miss Belmont should be considered indeed as my sister, should be considered indeed as my sister, and as the co-heiress of my father. Though not in law in justice, he says, she ought ever to be treated as the daughter of Sir John Belmont. O Lord Orville, it shall be the sole study of my happy life to express better than by words the sense I have of your exalted benevolence and greatness of mind. I don't know what to make of Sir John Belmont. It's impossible to read him seriously. I mean, it's all very melodramatic. I can't get a grip on his character. He exists first to be the father who spurned his daughter, now to be the anguished father who thought he hadn't, and receives her and blesses her. It's like something off the stage rather than a novel. It's to me, these scenes don't ring emotionally true, although they're full of great emotion. They don't stir me in the way other scenes might. Anyway, be interested to hear what you think. I'm also interested from a linguistic point of view. Burney has Sir John Belmont and Mr. Villiers use the old-fashioned thee and thou and thy form, but none of the other characters. And I thought perhaps it was because Mr. Villiers was very old and that it was literally an old-fashioned usage. But Sir John is not that old. He must be a similar age. He's a similar age to probably the Captain and Mrs. Mervyn, to Mrs. Selwyn, to Mrs. Beaumont. He's middle-aged, so I'm not sure. Is it this formal speech? Is it to do with the theatre? Somebody can go over the pragmatics of this. I'd be most interested as to why Burney has chosen this register for both Mr. Villiers and Sir John Belmont. Is it to do with the fact that they are serious, that they are in some way part of a dramatic construct that is not satire, that is different? Is it a genre issue? Anyway, it's interesting. It adds to the stage-like feeling of Sir John's speeches. Anyway, I will do one shortish letter and then leave you for the evening. Letter the 81st, Evelina in continuation. Clifton, 12th October. This morning early I received the following letter from Sir Clement Willoughby. To Miss Anville. I have this moment received intelligence that preparations are actually making for your marriage with Lord Orville. Imagine not that I write with the imbecile idea of rendering those preparations abortive. No, I am not so mad. My sole view is to explain the motive of my conduct in a particular instance, and to obviate the accusation of treachery which may be laid to my charge. My unguarded behaviour when I last saw you has probably already acquainted you that the letter I then saw you reading was written by myself. For your further satisfaction, let me have the honour of informing you that the letter you had designed for Lord Orville had fallen into my hands. However I may have been urged on by a passion the most violent that ever warmed the heart of man, I can by no means calmly submit to be stigmatized for an action seemingly so dishonourable, and it is for this reason that I trouble you with this justification. Lord Orville, the happy Orville who you are so ready to bless, had made me believe he loved you not, nay, that he held you in contempt. Such were my thoughts of his sentiments of you, when I got possession of the letter you meant to send him. I pretend not to vindicate either the means I used to obtain it, or the action of breaking the seal, but I was impelled by an impetuous curiosity to discover the terms upon which you wrote to him. The letter, however, was wholly unintelligible to me, and the perusal of it only added to my perplexity. A tame suspense I was not born to endure, and I determined to clear my doubts at all hazards and events. I answered it, therefore, in Orville's name. The views which I am now going to acknowledge must infallibly incur your displeasure, yet I scorn all palliation. Briefly, then, I concealed your letter to prevent a discovery of your capacity, and I wrote you an answer which I hoped would prevent you wishing for any other. I am well aware of everything which can be said upon this subject. Lord Orville will possibly think himself ill-used, but I am extremely indifferent as to his opinion, nor do I write now by way of offering any apology to him, but merely to make known to yourself the reasons by which I should have been governed. I intend to set off next week for the Continent. Should his lordship have any commands for me in the meantime, I shall be glad to receive them. I say this not by any ways of defiance. I should blush to be suspected of so doing through an indirect channel, but simply that, if you show him this letter, he may know I dare defend as well as excuse my conduct. Clement Willoughby. What a strange letter! How proud and how piqued does its writer appear! To what alternate meanness and rashness do the passions lead, when reason and self-denial do not oppose them! Sir Clement is conscious he has acted dishonourably, yet the same unbridled vehemence which urged him to gratify a blamable curiosity will sooner prompt him to risk his life than confess his misconduct. The rudeness of his manner in writing to me springs from the same cause. The proof which he has received of my indifference to him has stung him to the soul, and he has neither the delicacy nor forbearance to disguise his displeasure. I determined not to show this letter to Lord Orville, and thought it most prudent to let Sir Clement know I should not. I therefore wrote the following note. To Sir Clement Willoughby. Sir, the letter you have been pleased to address to me is so little calculated to afford Lord Orville any satisfaction, that you may depend upon my carefully keeping it from his sight. I will bear you no resentment for what is past, but I most earnestly entreat, nay implore, that you not write again, while in your present frame of mind, by any channel, direct or indirect. I hope you will have much pleasure in your promised expedition, and I beg leave to assure you of my good wishes. Not knowing by what name to sign, I was obliged to send it without any. The preparations which Sir Clement mentions go on just as if your consent were arrived. It is in vain that I expostulate. Lord Orville says should any objections be raised, all shall be given up, but that as his hopes forbid him to expect any, he must proceed as if already assured of your concurrence. We have had this afternoon a most interesting conversation, in which we have traced our sentiments of each other from our first acquaintance. I have made him confess how ill he thought of me upon my foolish giddiness at Mrs. Stanley's ball, but he flatters me with assurances that every succeeding time he saw me I appeared to something less and less disadvantage. When I expressed my amazement that he could honour with his choice a girl who seemed so infinitely in every respect beneath his alliance, he frankly owned that he had fully intended making more minute inquiries into my family and connections, and particularly concerning those people he saw me with at Marybone, before he acknowledged his prepossession in my favour. But the suddenness of my intended journey, and the uncertainty of seeing me again, put him quite off his guard, and, divesting him of prudence, left him nothing but love. These were his words, and yet he has repeatedly assured me that his partiality has known no bounds from the time of my residing at Clifton. Mr. Macartney has just been with me, on an embassy from my father. He has sent me his kindest love and assurances of favour, and desired to know if I am happy in the prospect of changing my situation, and if there is anything I can name which he can do for me. At the same time, Mr. Macartney delivered to me a draft on my father's banker for £1,000, which he insisted that I should receive entirely for my own use, and expend in equipping myself properly for the new rank of life to which I seem destined. I am sure I need not say how much I was penetrated by this goodness. I wrote my thanks, and acknowledged frankly that if I could see him restored to tranquillity, my heart would be without a wish. And we will stop there for this evening. Tomorrow we will finish. There are been quite a long episode. There are 15 pages left, and normally I read about 10 to 12, but I'm sure it will be worth it. Good night.